Facebook's about 18 years old, coming on 20. Facebook has a lot of data. How much stuff have you given Facebook? Or did you fall victim for that? Hey, upload your contacts, we'll find your friends. They don't know where your data is. This whole thing with Facebook has exploded here lately. There's an article that had appeared online from our friends over at, I think it was, let me see here. Motherboard. I was right. And Motherboard's reporting that Facebook doesn't know what it does with your data or where it goes. Now, there's always a lot of rumors about different companies, and particularly when they're a big company and the news headlines are grabbing your attention, and certainly Facebook can be one of those companies. So where did Motherboard get this opinion about Facebook just being completely clueless about your personal? It came from a leaked document. Yeah, exactly. So we find out a lot of stuff like that. I used to follow a website about companies that were going to go under, and they posted internal memos. They basically got sued out of existence. But there's no way that Facebook is going to be able to sue this one out of existence, because they are describing this as internally as a tsunami of privacy regulations all over the world. So, Gores, if you're older, we used to call those tidal waves, but think of what the implication there is of a tsunami coming in and just overwhelming everything. So Facebook internally, their engineers are trying to figure out, okay, so how do we deal with people's personal data? It's not categorized in ways that regulators want to control it. Now, there's a huge problem right there. You've got third-party data, you've got first-party data, you've got sensitive categories data. They might know what religion you are, what your persuasions are in various different ways. There's a lot of things they might know about you. How are they all categorized? Now, we've got the European Union with their General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, we talked about when it came into effect back in 2018, and I've helped a few companies to comply with that. That's not my specialty. My specialty is the cybersecurity side. But in Article 5, this European law mandates that personal data must be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes and not further processed in a manner that is incompatible with those purposes. So what that means is that every piece of data, like where you are using Facebook or your religious orientation, can only be collected and used for a specific purpose and not reused for another purpose. As an example here that Vice is giving, in past, Facebook took the phone number that users provided to protect their accounts with two-factor authentication and fed it to its people feature, as well as to advertisers. Yeah, interesting, eh? So Gizmodo, with the help of academic researchers, caught Facebook doing this, and eventually the company had to stop the practice. And this goes back to the earlier days where Facebook would say, hey, find out if your friends are on Facebook. Upload your contacts right now. And most people, what did you know back then about trying to keep your data private, to try and stop the proliferation of information about you online? And nothing. I think I probably even uploaded it back then, thinking, it'd be nice to see if I got friends here. We can start chatting, etc. According to legal experts that were interviewed by Motherboard, who wrote this article and has a copy of the internal memo, this European regulation specifically prohibits that kind of repurposing of your phone number, of trying to put together the social graph. And the leaked document shows that Facebook may not even have the ability to limit how it handles users' data. Now, I was on a number of radio stations this week talking about this, and the example I gave is just look at an average business from the time it starts. Facebook started how, right? Well, they scrape in pictures of young women off of Harvard University main catalog, contact page, and then asking people, what do you think of this person, that person? And off they go, trying to rate them. Yeah, all that matters to a woman, at least according to Mark Zuckerberg, or all that matters about a woman is how she looks. Do I think she's pretty or not? Ridiculous what he was doing. It's just, that's Zuckerberg, who he is. Not a great guy. Anyways, so you go from stealing pictures of young ladies, asking people to rate them, putting together some class information and stuff there at Harvard, and then moving on to other universities and then opening it up even wider and wider. And of course, that also created demand because you can't get on if you're not at one of the universities that we have set it up for. And then you continue to grow. You're adding these universities, you're starting to collect data, and you're making more money than God. So what do? You don't have to worry about inefficiencies, I'll tell you that, right? One thing you don't have to do is worry about, we've got a lot of redundant work going on here. We've got a lot of teams working on basically the same thing. No, you've got more money than you can possibly shake a stick at. So now you go ahead and send that money to this group or that group, and they put together all of the basic information that they want. They are pulling it out of this database and that database, and they're doing some correlation writing, some really cool SQL queries with incredible joins and everything else. And now that becomes part of the main code for Facebook. And then Facebook goes on to the next little project, and they do the same thing. Then the next project, then the next project, and then someone comes along and says, hey, we want this feature or that feature for our advertisers. And then in that goes. And then along comes candidate Obama. And one of the groups inside Facebook says, yeah, here we go. Here's all of the information we have about everybody, and it's free. Don't worry about it. And then when Trump actually bought it and hired a company to try and process some of that information, he got in trouble. No, but the whole campaign could get access to anything they wanted to. Again, because the data wasn't controlled. They had no idea who was doing what with the data. And according to this internal memo, they still don't know. They don't even know if they can possibly comply with these regulations, not just in Europe, but we have regulations in pretty much all of the 50 states in the U.S. Canada, of course, has their own, Australia, New Zealand. Think about all the places Facebook makes a lot of money. So here's a quote from that. We build systems with open borders. The result of these open systems and open culture is well described with an analogy. Imagine you hold a bottle of ink in your hand. The bottle of ink is a mixture of all kinds of user data. You pour that ink into a lake of water, okay, and it flows everywhere. The document read. So how do you put that ink back in the bottle, in the right bottle? How do you organize it again so that it only flows to the allowed places in the lake? They're totally right about that. Where did they collect it from? Apparently, they don't even know where they got some of this information, this data from. It reminds me of the no-fly list. You don't know you're on it, and you can't get yourself off of it. It's crazy. So this document that we're talking about was written last year by Facebook privacy engineers on the ad and business product team, whose mission is to make meaningful connections between people and businesses, and which, quote, sits at the center of a monetization strategy and is the engine that powers Facebook's growth. Interesting problems. And I see this being a problem well into the future for more and more of these companies. Look at Twitter as an example that we've all heard about a lot lately, and I've talked about as well. Along comes Elon Musk, and he says, wait a minute now. I can make Twitter way more profitable. We're going to get rid of however many people, over 1,000, and then we are going to hire more people. We're going to start charging. We're going to be more efficient. You can bet all of these redundancies that are in Facebook are also there in Twitter. And Twitter also has to comply with all of these regulations that Facebook is freaking out about. Well, for really a very good reason. So this document is available to anybody who wants to look at it. I'm looking at it right now, talking about regulatory landscape and the fundamental problems of Facebook's data lake. And this is a problem that most companies have. Not as bad as Facebook does, but most companies, right, you grow. I have yet to walk into a business that needs help with cybersecurity and find everything in place as it should be. Because it grew organically. You started out with a little consumer firewall router and Wi-Fi, and then you added to it and you put a switch here and you added another switch behind that and moved things around. This is normal. This is not total incompetence on the part of the management, but my gosh, I don't know. Maybe they need an Elon Musk to straighten them out as well. Hey, stick around. I'll be right back, and sign up online at craigpeterson.com. Apparently, looting is one of the benefits of being a Russian soldier. And according to the reports coming out of Ukraine, they've been doing it a lot. But there's a tech angle on here that is really turning the tables on these Russian looters. We know in wars there are people that loot, and typically the various militaries try and make sure, at least recently, that looting is kept to an absolute minimum. Certainly the Americans, the British, even the Nazis during World War II, the socialists there in Germany, they tried to stop some of the looting that was going on. I think that's probably a very good thing, because what you end up with is just all of these locals that are just totally upset with you. I found a great article on The Guardian, and there's a village that had been occupied for about a month by Russian troops, and the people came back. They are just shocked to see what happened. They're giving a few examples of different towns. They found that alcohol was stolen and they left empty bottles behind, food wrappers, cigarette butts thrown all over the place in apartments and homes, piles of feces blocking the toilets, family photographs torn, thrown around the house. They took away all of the clothes. This is a quote from one of the people, literally everything, male and female coats, boots, shirts, jackets, even my dresses, and lingerie. This is really something. The Soviets didn't do this, but now Russian military apparently does. So over the past couple of weeks, there have been reporting from numerous places where Russian troops had occupied Ukrainian territory, and The Guardian, which is this UK newspaper, collected evidence that suggests looting by Russian forces was not merely a case of a few wayward soldiers, but a systematic part of Russian military behavior across multiple towns and villages. That's absolutely amazing. Another quote here. People saw the Russian soldiers loading everything onto Ural trucks, everything they could get their hands on. A dozen houses on the village's main street had been looted, as well as the shops. Other villagers reported losing washing machines, food, laptops, even a sofa, air conditioners, being shipped back. Just, you might use UPS here. They have their equivalent over there. A lady here who was the head teacher in the school, she came back in, of course, found her home looted. And in the head teacher's office, she found an open pair of scissors that had been jammed into a plasma screen that was left behind. Because if they can't steal it, they're going to destroy it. They don't leave anything behind. They found the Russians had taken most of the computers, the projectors, and other electronic equipment. It's incredible. So let's talk about the turnaround here a little bit. You might have heard stories about some of these bad guys that have smashed and grabbed their way into Apple stores. So they get into the Apple store, they grab laptops on iPads, no longer iPods because they don't make those anymore, and iPhones. and they take them and they run with them. Nowadays, there's not a whole lot of use for those. Now, what they have been doing, some of these bad guys, is they take some parts and use them in stolen equipment. They sell them on the used market, etc. But when you're talking about something specific, like an iPhone, that needs specific activation, completely different problem arises for these guys. Because that iPhone needs to have a SIM card in order to get onto the cell network, and it also has built-in serial numbers. So what happens in those cases? Well, Apple goes ahead and disables them. So as soon as they connect to the internet, let's say they put them on Wi-Fi, they don't get a SIM card, they don't buy service from T-Mobile or Verizon or whoever it might be. So now they just connect to the Wi-Fi and it calls home because it's going to get updates and download stuff from the App Store, and they find that it's been bricked. Now you can do that with a lot of mobile device managers that are available for all kinds of equipment nowadays, but certainly Apple equipment, where if a phone is lost or stolen, or a laptop or other pieces of equipment, you can get on the MDM and disable it, have it remotely erase, etc. Now, police have had some interesting problems with that because a bad guy might go ahead and erase a smartphone that's in the evidence locker at the police station. So they're doing things like putting them into Faraday cages or static bags or other things to try and stop that. So I think we've established here that the higher tech equipment is pretty well protected. You steal it, it's not going to do you much good. So one of the things the Russians stole when they were in, it's called, I think you pronounce Melitopol, which is again a Ukrainian city, is they stole all of the equipment from a farm equipment dealership and shipped it to Chechnya. Now that's according to a source in a businessman in the area that CNN is reporting on. So they shipped this equipment. We're talking about combines, harvesters worth $300,000 a piece. They shipped it 700 miles. And the thieves were ultimately unable to use the equipment because it had been locked remotely. So think about agriculture equipment, John Deere in this case. These pieces of equipment, they drive themselves. It's autonomous. It goes up and down the fields. It goes any pattern that you want to. It'll bring itself within a foot or an inch of your boundaries of your property, being very efficient the whole time, whether it's planting or harvesting, etc. And that's just a phenomenal thing because it saves so much time for the farmer, makes it easier to do. The companies like John Deere want to sell as many pieces of this equipment as they possibly can. And farming is known to be a, not terribly profitable business. It certainly isn't like Facebook. So how can they get this expensive equipment into the hands of a lot of farmers? What they do is they lease it. So you can lease the equipment through a leasing company or maybe directly from the manufacturer, and now you're off and running. But what happens if the lease isn't paid? Now, it's one thing if you don't pay your lease on a $2,000 laptop, right? They're probably not going to come hunting for you. But when you're talking about a $300,000 harvester, they're more interested. So the leasing company has title to the equipment, and the leasing company can shut it off remotely. You see where I'm going with this? So that they can get their equipment in the hands of more farmers, because the farmers can lease it. It costs them less. They don't have to have a big cash payment. You see how this all works. So when the Russian forces stole this equipment that's valued, total value here is about $5 million, they were able to shut it all off. And obviously, if you can't start the engine because it's all shut off and it's all run by computers nowadays, and there's pros and cons to that. I think there's a lot of cons. But what are you going to do? How's that going to work for you? Well, it isn't going to work for you. And they were able to track it. It had GPS trackers, find out exactly where it was. That's how they know it was taken to Chechnya and could be controlled remotely. And in this case, how'd they control it? They completely shut it off. Even if they sell the harvesters for spare parts, they'll earn some money, but they sure aren't going to be able to sell them for the $300,000 that they were actually worth. Hey, stick around. We'll be right back. And visit me online at craigpeterson.com. If you sign up there, you'll be able to get my insider show notes. And every week I have a quick 5-minute training right there in your emails. craigpeterson.com. If you've been worried about ransomware, you are right to worry. It's up, it's costly, and we're going to talk about that right now. What are the stats? What can you do? What happens if you do get hacked? Interesting world. Ransomware has been a very long-running problem. I remember a client of ours, a car dealership, who we had gone in, we had improved all of their systems and their security, and one of their people, who was actually a senior manager, ended up downloading a piece of ransomware, one of these encrypted ones, and opened it up, and his machine, all of a sudden, ta-da, guess what? It had ransomware on it. One of those big red screens that say, pay up. You send us this much Bitcoin, and here's our address, all of that sort of stuff. And he called us up and said, what's going on here? What happened? First of all, don't bring your own machine into the office. Secondly, don't open up particularly encrypted files using a password that they gave you. And thirdly, we stopped it automatically. It did not spread. We were able to completely restore his computer. Now, let's consider here at the consequences of what happened. So he obviously was scared, and within a matter of a couple of hours, we actually had him back to where he was, and it didn't spread. So the consequences there, they weren't that bad. But how about if it had gotten worse? How about if the ransomware also, before it started holding his computer ransom, went out and found all of the data about their customers? Do you think an auto dealership would love to hear that all of their customer data was stolen and released, all of the personal data of all of their customers? Obviously not. So there's a potential cost there. And then how long do you think it would take a normal company that thinks they have backups to get back online? Well, I can tell you it'll take quite a while, because the biggest problem is most backups don't work. We have yet to go into a business that was actually doing backups that would work to help restore them. And if you're interested, I can send you, I've got something I wrote up, be glad to email it back to you. Obviously, as usual, no charge, right? And you'll be able to go into that and figure out what you should do, because I break it down into the different types of backups and why you might want to use them or why you might not want to use them. But ransomware is a kind of a pernicious, nasty little thing, particularly nowadays, because it's two-factor. First is they've encrypted your data, you can't get to it. And then the second side of that is, okay, I can't get to my data, and now they're threatening to hold my data ransom, or they'll release it. So they'll put it out there. And of course, if you're in a regulated industry, which actually car dealers are, because they deal with financial transactions, leases, loans, that sort of thing, you can lose your license for your business. You can lose your ability to go ahead and, frankly, make loans and work with financial companies and financial instruments. It could be a very big deal. So there are a lot of potential things that can happen, all the way from losing your reputation as a business or an individual, losing all of the money in your operating account. And we've got a client that we picked up afterwards that, yes, indeed, they lost all of the money in their operating account. And then how do you make payroll? How do you do things? There's a new study that came out from Check Point. Check Point is one of the original firewall companies. And they had a look at ransomware. What are the costs of ransomware? Now, bottom line, I'm looking at some stats here on a couple of different sites. One is, by the way, Conti, which is a big ransomware gang that also got hacked after they said we are going to attack anyone that doesn't defend Vlad's invasion of Ukraine, and then they got hacked and their information was released. But here's the ransomware statistics. This is from CloudWords. First of all, the largest ransom demand is $50 million, and that was in 2021 to Acer, big computer company. 37% of businesses were hit by ransomware in 2021. This is amazing. They're expecting by 2031, so in about a decade, ransomware is going to be costing about $265 billion a year. Now, on average, ransomware costs businesses $1.85 million to recover from an attack. Now, that's obviously not a one or two person place, but think of the car dealer again. How much money are they going to make over the year or over the life of the business? If you're a car dealer, you have a license to print money, right? You're selling car model or cars from manufacturer X. And now you have the right to do that, and they can remove that. How many tens, hundreds of millions of dollars might that end up costing you? Yeah, big deal. Total cost of ransomware last year, $20 billion. Now, these are the interesting statistics here right now, so pay closer attention to this. 32% of ransomware victims paid a ransom demand. So about a third paid a ransom demand last year. It's actually down because my recollection is it used to be about 50% would pay a ransom. Now, on average, that one-third of victims that paid a ransom only recovered 65% of their data. Now, that differs from a number I've been using from the FBI that's a little bit older that was saying it's a little better than 50%. But 65% of paying victims recovered their data. Now, isn't that absolutely amazing? Now, 57% of companies were able to recover their data using a cloud backup. Now, think about the different types of backup. Cloud backup is something that can work pretty well if you're a home user. But how long did it take for your system to get backed up? Probably took weeks, right? For a regular computer over a regular internet line. Now, restoring from backup is going to be faster because your downlink is usually faster than your uplink. That's not true for businesses that have real internet service like ours. It's the same bandwidth up as it is down. But it can take, again, days or weeks to try and recover your machine. So it's very expensive, and I wish I had more time to go into this. But looking at the costs here and the fact that insurance companies are no longer paying out for a lot of these ransomware attacks, it could be incredibly expensive for you. Incredibly. The number one business types by industry for ransomware attacks, retail, that makes sense, doesn't it? Real estate, electrical contractors, law firms, and wholesale building materials. Isn't that interesting? And that's probably because none of these people are really aware or conscious of doing what? Of keeping their data secure, of having a good IT team, a good IT department. So there's your bottom line. Those are the guys that are getting hit the most. The numbers are increasing dramatically, and your costs are not just in the money you might pay as a ransom. As it turns out, in pretty much every case, prevention is less expensive and much better than the cure of trying to pay ransom or trying to restore from backups. Hey, you're listening to Craig Peterson. You can get my weekly show notes by just going to craigpeterson.com. You and I have talked about passwords before, the way to generate them, and how important they are. We'll go over that again a little bit in just a second, but there's a new standard out there that will eliminate the need for passwords. Passwords are a necessary evil. At least they have been forever. I remember, I think the only system I've ever really used that did not require passwords was the IBM 360. Yeah, 360, you punch up the cards, all of the JCL, you feed it the card deck in, and off it goes and does its little thing. That was a different day, a different era. When I started in college, in university, we had remote systems, timeshare systems that we could log into, and there weren't much in the line of password requirements then. But you had a username, you had a simple password, and I remember one of our instructors, his name was Robert Andrew Lang, and his password was always some sort of a combination of R.A. Lang. So it was always easy to guess what his password was. Today, it has gotten a lot worse. Today, we have devices with us all of the time. You might be wearing a smart watch that requires a password. You, of course, probably have a smartphone that's also maybe requiring a password, certainly after it boots. Nowadays, they use fingerprints or facial recognition, which is handy but has its own drawbacks. But how about the websites you're going to, the systems you're using when you're at work and logging in? They all require passwords and usernames of some sort or another. Well, Apple, Google, and Microsoft have all committed to expanding their support for a standard that's actually been out there for a few years. It's called the FIDO standard. And the idea behind this is that you don't have to have a password in order to log in. Now, that's really an interesting thing, right? Just looking at it, because we're so used to having this password-only authentication. And of course, the thing to do there is make sure you have, for your password, multiple words in the password. It should really be a passphrase. And between the words, put in special characters or numbers. Maybe mix upper lowercase a little bit in those words. Those are the best passwords. 20 characters, 30 characters long. And then if you have to have a PIN, I typically use a 12-digit PIN. And how do I remember all of these? Because I use a completely different password for every website. And right now, let me pull it up. I'm using 1password.com's password manager. And my main password for that is about 25 characters long. And I have 3,135 entries here in my password manager. 3,100. That is a whole lot of passwords, right? As well as software licenses and a few other things in there. That's how I remember them, is using a password manager. 1password.com is my favorite. Now, obviously, I don't make any money by referring you there. I really do like that. Some others that I've liked in the past include LastPass, but they really messed up with some of their cybersecurity last year, and I lost my faith in it. So now what they're trying to do is make these websites that we go to, as well as some apps, to have a consistent, secure, and passwordless sign-in. And they're going to make it available to consumers across all kinds of devices and platforms. That's why you've got Apple, Google, and Microsoft all committing to it. And you can bet everybody else is going to follow along, because there's hundreds of other companies that have decided they're going to work with the FIDO Alliance. And they're going to create this passwordless future, which I like this idea. So how does this work? Basically, you need to have a smartphone. I'm just going to go with the most standard way that this is going to work here in the future. And you can then have a pass key. This is like a multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. So for instance, right now, when I sign into a website online, I'm giving a username, I'm giving a password, and then it comes up and it asks me for a code. So I enter in a 6-digit code, and that code changes every 30 seconds. And again, I use my password manager from 1password.com in order to generate that code. So that's how I log into Microsoft sites and Google sites and all kinds of sites out there. So it's a similar thing here. Now, for the sites for my company, because we do cybersecurity for businesses, including regulated businesses, we have biometrics tied in as well. So to log into our systems, I have to have a username, I have to have a password. I then am sent to a single sign-on page where I have to have a message sent to my smart device that then has a special app that uses biometrics, either a Face ID or a fingerprint, to verify who I am. Yeah, there's a lot there, but I have to protect my customers' data, something that very few, it's crazy, actual managed security services providers do. But it's important, right? By the way, if you want my password special report, just go to craigpeterson.com, sign up for my email list. I'll send that to you. That's what we're sending out right now for anyone who signs up new at craigpeterson.com. And if you'd like a copy of it and you're already on the list, just go ahead and email me, M-E, at craigpeterson.com, and ask for the password special report where I go through a lot of this sort of thing. So what will happen with this is you go to a website and it might come up with a QR code. So you then scan that QR code with your phone and verify it, authorize it on your phone. You might, again, have it set up so that your phone requires facial recognition, or perhaps it'll require a fingerprint. And now you are in, which is very cool. They fixed some security problems in FIDO over the last few years, which is great. Over the coming year, you're going to see this available on Apple devices, Google, Microsoft platforms. And it really is simple, stronger authentication. That's what FIDO calls it, right? But it is going to make your life a lot easier. It is a standard, and the passwordless future makes a whole lot of sense for all of us. Now, I want to talk about another thing here that has bothered me for a long time. I have a sister-in-law who is in the medical field and gives prescriptions, a doctor's thing, and I think she's not quite a doctor. I can't remember what she has. She's an LPN or something. Anyhow, so she will get on a Zoom call with someone and they'll go through medical history and what's happening right now, and she'll make prescriptions. And so I warned her about that, saying it is very bad to be using Zoom because Zoom is not secure, never has been, probably never will be, right? If you want secure, you have to go and pay for it from one of these providers like WebEx. That's what we use. We have a version of WebEx that is set up to be secure. So I talked to her about that and said, hey, listen, you can't do this. You've really got to go another way here. And so she started using one of these mental or medical health apps. What I want to talk about right now specifically are some checks that were just performed, some audits on mental health apps. That's why I messed up a second ago. But what they looked at is that things are a serious problem there. And in fact, the threat post is calling it creepy, frankly, just plain old creepy. So they've got some good intentions. They want to help with mental health. You've probably seen these or at least heard them advertised, so you can get on the horn with a mental health professional, a doctor or otherwise, in order to help you here with your psychological or spiritual well-being. And people are sharing their personal and sensitive data with third parties. And of 32 mental health and prayer mobile apps that were investigated by the open source organization, 28 of the 32 were found to be inherently insecure and were given a privacy not included label, including others here. So this is a report that was released here by the open source organization, tied into Mozilla. Those are the Firefox people. They have what they call their minimum security standards. So things like requiring strong passwords, managing security updates and vulnerabilities, etc. 25 of the 32 failed to meet even those minimum security standards. So these apps are dealing with some of the most sensitive mental health and wellness issues people can possibly have, right? Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, domestic violence, eating disorders. And they are being just terrible with your security. Mozilla researchers spent 255 hours or about 8 hours per product peering under the hood of the security, watching the data that was going back and forth, right, between all of these mental health and prayer apps. It was just crazy. So, for example, 8 of the apps reviewed allowed weak passwords that range from digit 1 as the password to 1111, while a mental health app called MoodFit only required 1 letter or digit as a password. Now, that is very concerning for an app that collects mood and symptom data. So be very careful. 2 of the apps, BetterHelp, a popular app that connects users with therapists, and Better Stop Suicide, which is, of course, a suicide prevention app, have vague and messy, according to Mozilla, privacy policies that have little or no effect on actual user data protection. So be very careful. And if you're a mental health professional or a medical professional, don't just go and use these open video calls, etc., etc. Find something good, and there are some standards out there. Again, visit me online, get my insider show notes every week, get my little mini trainings. They come out most weeks. Just go to craigpeterson.com, and I'll send you my special report on passwords and more. We know the Russians have been attacking us. I've talked a lot about it on the radio station, all kinds of stations, in fact, here over the last couple of weeks. And I am doing something special. We are going through the things you can do to keep safe. Last week, we started doing something I promised we would continue, and that is, how can you protect yourself when it comes to the Russians, right? When it comes to the bad guys, because the Russians are definitely the bad guys. There's a few things you can do, and there's a few things, frankly, you shouldn't be doing, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So last week we went over some steps, some things that you can look at, that you should look at, that are going to help protect you. And we are going to go into this a whole lot more today. And so I want you to stick around. And if you miss anything, you can go online. You can go to craigpeterson.com. Make sure you sign up there for my email. And what I'm going to do for you is I will send you a few different documents. Now, we can chat back and forth about it, but I can send you this. Now, I'm recording this on video as well as on audio, so you can follow along if you're watching either on YouTube or over on Rumble, and you can find it also on my website. I've been trying to post it up there too. But right now, let's talk about what we call passive back-end protections. So you've got the front end, and the front end, of course, is stuff coming at you, maybe to the firewall. I've mentioned last week about customers of mine. I was just looking at a few customers this week just so I could have an idea at their firewalls. And they were getting about 10 attacks per minute. Yeah, and these were customers who have requirements from the Department of Defense because they are defense subcontractors. So again, potential bad guys. So I looked up their IP addresses and where the attacks were coming from. Now remember, that doesn't mean where they originated, because the bad guys can hop through multiple machines and then get onto your machine. What it means is that ultimately they ended up coming from one machine, right? So there's an IP address of that machine that's attacking my clients or attacking my machines. It just happens all the time. A lot of scans, but some definite attacks where they're trying to log in using SSH. And what I found is these were coming from Slovakia, Russia, and Iran. kind of what you were expecting, right? The Iranians, they just haven't given up yet. They keep trying to attack, particularly our military and our industry. One of the things we found out this week from, again, this was an FBI notice, is that the Russians have been going after our industrial base. And that includes, in fact, it's more specifically our automobile manufacturers. We've already got problems, right? Try buying a new car, try buying parts. I was with my friend just this week. I helped him because he had his car, right? It needed to get picked up. So I took him over to pick up his car, and we chatted a little bit with this small independent automotive repair shop. And they were telling us that they're getting sometimes 6 to 8 week delays on getting parts, and some parts they just can't get. So they're going to everything from junkyards on out. And the worst parts are the parts, the official parts from the car manufacturers. So what's been happening is Russia apparently has been hacking into these various automobile manufacturers and automobile parts manufacturers. And once they're inside, they've been putting in remote control botnets. And those botnets now have the ability to wake up when they want them to wake up. And then once they've woken up, what do? Who knows? They've been busy erasing machines, causing nothing but havoc. They've been doing all kinds of stuff in the past. Today, they're sitting there idle, which makes you think they're waiting. It's accumulate as much as you possibly can. And then once you've got it all accumulated, go ahead and attack. So they could control thousands of machines. But they're not just in the U.S. It's automobile manufacturers in Japan as well that we found out about. So that's what they're doing right now. So you got the kind of that front end and back end protections. So we're going to talk a little bit about the back end. What does that mean when a cybersecurity guy talks about the back end and the protection? I got it up on my screen right now, but here's the things you can do. Okay, remember, small businesses are just getting nailed from these guys because, again, they're fairly easy targets. One, change your passwords, right? How many times do we have to say that? And yet, about 70% of businesses out there are not using a good password methodology. Again, if you want more information on passwords, two-factor authentication, you name it, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. I want to get the information out. Now, you got to make sure that all of the passwords on your systems are encrypted, are stored in some sort of a good password vault. As you really should be looking at 256-bit encryption or better. I have a vendor of mine that I use. So if you get my emails every week, when then there's the little training, and so I'll give you a 5-minute training. It's written. Usually it's in bullet point form, just to help you understand things. That provider of mine has a big database, and there's another provider that I use that is for training. So the training guys use the database of my provider. In using that database, they're storing the passwords. And the training provider is putting passwords in the clear into the database, which is absolutely crazy. So again, if you're a business, if you're storing any sort of personal information, particularly passwords, make sure that you're using good encryption and you're what's called salting the hash, which means you're not really storing the password, you're storing a salted hash. I can send you more on this if you are a business and you're developing software. This is long tail stuff here. Configure all of the security password settings so that if someone's trying to log in and is failing, and you block it. Many of us, let's say you're a small business. I see this all of the time, okay? You're not to blame. But you have a firewall that came from the cable company. Maybe you bought it at a big box retailer. Maybe you bought it online over at Amazon, and it's working really great for you. Has it got settings on there that let you say, hey, if there's 20 attempts to log in, maybe we should stop them? Now, what we do personally for our customers is typically we'll block them at somewhere around 3 or 4 failed attempts, and then their passwords blocked. Now, you can configure that sort of thing if you're using email, and that's an important thing to do, let me tell you, because we've had some huge breaches due to email, like Microsoft email and passwords and people logging in and stealing stuff. It was just a total nightmare for the entire industry last year. But limit the number of login retries as well as you're in there. These excessive login attempts, whatever you want to define it as, needs to lock the account. And what that means is, even if they have the right password, they can't get in. And you have to use an administrative password in order to get in. You also want to what's called throttle the rate of repeated logins. Now, you might have gotten caught on this, right? You went to your bank, you went to eBay, you went to any of these places, and all of a sudden it denied you, right? It blocked you. That can happen when your account is on these hackers' lists. Remember last week we talked about password spraying? Well, that's a very big deal, and hackers are doing the spraying trick all of the time, and that is causing you to get locked out of your own account. So if you do get locked out, remember it might be because someone's trying to break in. Obviously, you have to enforce the policies. CAPTCHA is a very good thing. Again, this is more for a software developer. We always recommend that you use multi-factor or two-factor authentication, and do not use your SMS, your text messages for that, where they'll send you a text message to verify who you are. If you can avoid that, you're much better off, because there's some easy ways to get around that for hackers that are determined, okay? Multi-factor, again, install an intrusion detection system. We put right at the network edge and between workstations and servers, even inside the network, we put detection systems that look for intrusion attempts and block intrusion attempts. Very important. Use deny lists to block known attackers. We build them automatically. We use some of the higher end Cisco gear. Cisco is a big network provider. They have some of the best hardware and software out there, and you have to subscribe to it. A lot of people complain, well, I can just go buy a firewall for $200 on Amazon. Why would I pay that much a month just to have a Cisco firewall? It's like paying for the brand. I got my logo shirt on here. I wouldn't pay for that. No, it's because they are automatically providing block lists that are updated by the minute sometimes. And then make sure you've got an incident response plan in place. What are you going to do when they come for you? What are you going to do? Now we're going to talk about prevention. What can you do in order to stop some of these attacks that are coming from Russia and from other countries? It is huge, people. Believe me, this is a very big problem, and I'm here to help. We've reviewed a number of things that are important when it comes to your cybersecurity and your protection. We talked about the front end, we talked about the back end. Now we're going to talk about pure prevention. And if you're watching online, you'll be able to see my slides as they come up as we talk about some of this stuff. And you'll find me on YouTube, and you'll also find me on Rumble, a fairly new platform out there, a platform that doesn't censor you for the things you say, okay? So here we go. First of all, enabling your Active Directory password protection is going to enforce password protection all the way through your business. Now, I've had some discussions with people over the months, over the years about this whole thing and what should be done, what can be done, what cannot be done. Hey, it's a very big deal when it comes to password protection. And Active Directory, believe it or not, even though it's a Microsoft product, is pretty darn good at a few things. One of them is controlling all of the machines and the devices. One of the things we do is we use an MDM, or what used to be a mobile device manager, called Mass 360. It's available from IBM. We have a special version of it that allows us as a managed security services provider to be able to control everything on people's machines. But Active Directory is something you should seriously consider. If you are a Mac-based shop like I am, in fact, I'm sitting right now in front of 2 Macs that I'm using right now, you'll find that Active Directory is a little bit iffy sometimes for Macs. There are some workarounds, and it's gotten better. Mass 360 is absolutely the way to go. But make sure you've got really good passwords. And the types of passwords that are most prone to spraying attacks are the ones you should be banning specifically. Remember the website, Have I Been Pwned? Yeah, it's something that you should go to pretty frequently. And again, if you miss anything today, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. Believe me, I am not going to harass you at all, okay? Now, the next thing that you should be doing is what's called red team, blue team. Now, the red team is a group of people, usually outside of your organization. If you're a big company, they're probably inside. But the red team is the team that attacks you. They're white hat hackers who are attacking you, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for things that you should or shouldn't be doing. And then the blue team is the side that's trying to defend. So think of like war games. Remember that movie with Matthew Broderick all of those decades ago? And how he was trying to defend. That computer was trying to defend, then it moved into an attack mode, right? Red team's attack, blue team is defend. So you want to conduct simulated attacks. Now, conducting these attacks includes saying, oh my, let's now put in place and execute our plan here for what are we going to do once we have a breach. And you darn well better have a breach plan in place. So that's one of the things that we help as a fractional chief information security officer for companies, right? You got to get that in place. And you have to conduct these simulated attacks, and you have to do penetration testing, including password spraying attacks. There's so many things you can do. One of the things that we like to do, and that you might want to do, whether you're a home user, retiree, or a business, is go and look online. You can just use Google. I use far more advanced tools, but you can use Google and look for your email address right there. Look for the names of people inside your organization. And then say, wait a minute, does that data actually need to be there? Or am I really exposing the company, exposing people's information that shouldn't be out there? Because remember, the hackers, one of the things they do is they phish you. Phish as in PH. So they'll send you an email that looks legit. Hey, let me see. I know that Mary is the CFO, and I know that Joe's going to be out of town for 2 weeks in the Bahamas and out of touch. So while he's gone, I'm going to send an email to Mary to get her to do something to transfer the company's funds to me, okay? So that's what that's all about. You've got to make sure, where is our information? And if you go to my company's page, mainstream.net, you'll see on there that I don't list any of the officers, any of the people that are in the company, because that, again, is a security problem. We're letting them know. I go to some of these sites, like professional sites, lawyers, doctors, accountants, and I find right there all of their people, right? Their top people, or sometimes all of them. And it'll say, yeah, went to McGill University, went to Harvard, whatever it might be. It's all there. So now they've got great information to phish you, to phish that company, because all they have to do is send an email saying, hey, remember me? We're in Harvard, we're in this class together. And did you have as a professor? Do you see how that works? Okay. You also want to make sure that you implement what's called a passwordless user agent. And this is just so effective. If they cannot get into your account, what could possibly go wrong? But one of the ways to not allow them into the account is to use biometrics. We use something called Duo, and we have that tied into the single sign-on, and the Duo single sign-on works great, because what it does now is I go to a site, I put in my username, and it pulls up a special splash page that is running on one of our servers that again asks me for my Duo username. So I've got my username for the site, then my Duo username and my Duo password, single sign-on, and then it sends me to an app on my smart device a request saying, hey, are you trying to log into Microsoft and whatever it might be at Microsoft? And you can say yes or no. And it uses biometrics. So those biometrics now are great because it says, oh, okay, I need a Face ID or I need a thumbprint, whatever it might be. That allows a generalized passwordless access, okay? Passwordless meaning no password. So those are some of the top things you can do when it comes to prevention. And if you use those, they're never going to be able to get at your data because it's something you have along with something. It works great. And we like to do this. Some customers don't like to go through those hoops of the single sign-on and using Duo and making that all work, right? We're fine with it. We've got to keep ourselves at least as secure as the DoD regulations require, unlike almost anybody else in the industry. I'm not going to brag about it. But some of our clients don't like to meet the tightest of controls, and so sometimes they don't. I hate to say that, but they just don't. And it's a fine line between getting your work done and being secure. But I think there's some compromises that can be readily made. We're going to talk next about saving your data from ransomware and the newest ransomware. We're going to talk about the third generation that's out there right now, ransomware. It's getting crazy, let me tell you. And what it's doing to us and what you can do. What is a good backup? That has changed over the last 12 months. It's changed a lot. I used to preach 3-2-1. There's a new sheriff in town. Stick around. CraigPeterson.com. 3-2-1. That used to be the standard, the gold standard for backing up. It is no longer the case. With now the third generation of ransomware, you should be doing something even better, and we'll talk about it now. We're doing this as a simulcast here. It's on YouTube. It is also on Rumble. It's on my website at CraigPeterson.com because we're going through the things that you can do, particularly if you're a business, to stop the Russian invasion. Because as we've been warned again and again, the Russians are after us and our data. So if you missed part of what we're talking about today or you missed last week's show, make sure you send me an email, me at CraigPeterson.com. This is the information you need if you are responsible in any way for computers. That means in your home, right? Certainly in businesses, because what I'm trying to do is help and save those small businesses that just can't afford to have full-time true cybersecurity personnel on site. So that's what the whole fractional chief information security officer thing is about, because you can't possibly afford it. And believe me, that guy that comes in to fix your computers is no cybersecurity expert. And these people that are attacking are full-time cybersecurity experts, and they're coming from every country in the world, including coming from the U.S. We just had more arrests last week. So let's talk about ransomware quickly here. Ransomware, very big problem, been around a long time. The first version of ransomware was software, got onto your computer through some mechanism, and then you had that red screen. We've all seen that red screen. And it says, hey, pay up, buddy. It says here you need to send so many Bitcoin or fraction of a Bitcoin or so many dollars worth of Bitcoin to this Bitcoin wallet. And if you need any help, you can send email here or do a live chat. They're very sophisticated. We should talk about it some more at some point. That was generation one. Generation two was not everybody was paying the ransoms. So what did they do at that point? Well, they said, let me see if we could ransom the data by encrypting it and having them pay us to get it back. 50% of the time-ish, you got all your data back. Okay, not very often. Not often enough, that's for sure. Or what we could do is let's steal some of their intellectual property. Let's steal some of their data, their social security number, their bank account numbers, etc. They're in an Excel spreadsheet on their computer. And then if they don't pay that first ransom, we'll tell them if they don't pay up, we'll release their information. Sometimes you'll pay that first ransom and then they will hold you ransom a second time, pretending to be a different group of cyber terrorists, okay? Number 3, round 3 is what we're seeing right now. And this is what's coming from Russia, near as everything we can tell. And that is they are erasing our machines. Totally erasing them. Pretty sophisticated ways of erasing it as well, so that it's impossible to recover. It's sophisticated in that it doesn't delete some key registry entries until right at the very end, and then reboots the computer, and of course there's no computer left to reboot, right? It's lost everything off of that hard drive or SSD, whatever your boot device is. So let's talk about the best ways here to do some of this backup and saving your data from ransomware. Now, you need to use off-site disconnected backups, no question about it. So let's talk about what's been happening. Hospitals, businesses, police departments, schools, they've all been hit, right? And these ransomware attacks are usually started by a person clicking a link in an email. Now, this is a poison link most of the time. It used to be a little bit more where it was a Word document, an Excel document that had something nasty inside. Microsoft, as I've said many times, has truly pulled up their socks, okay? So it doesn't happen as much as it used to. Plus, with Malware Defender turned on in your Windows operating system, you're going to be a little bit safer. Next up, a program tries to run, okay, and it effectively denies access to all of that data because it's encrypted it. And usually what it does, so that your computer still works, is it encrypts all of your Word docs, your Excel docs, your databases, right? All the stuff that matters. And once they've got all of that encrypted, you can't really access it. Yeah, the file's there, but it looks like trash. Now, this new disturbing trend has really developed over the last few months. So in addition to encrypting your PC, it can now encrypt an entire network and all mounted drives, even drives that are mirroring cloud services. Remember this, everybody. This is really a big deal, because what will happen here is if you have, let's say you've got an O drive or G drive or some drive mounted off of your network, you have access to it from your computer, right? Yeah, you click on that drive and now you're in there in the Windows side. Unix and Macs are a little different, but same general idea. You have access to it. You have right access to it. So what they'll do is any mounted drive, like those network drives, is going to get encrypted. But the same thing is true if you are attaching a USB drive to your computer. So that USB drive now that has your backup on it gets encrypted. So if your network is being used to back up, and if you have a thumb drive, a USB drive, it's not really a thumb drive, right? It's an external drive, but connected via USB, hooked up, and that's where your backup lives, you're in big trouble because you have lost it. And there have been some pieces of software that have done that for a while. And when they can encrypt your network drive, it is really going after a whole bunch of people, because everyone that's using that network drive is now effective, and it is absolutely devastating. So the best way to do this is you do a bit of a local backup. We will usually put a server at the client site that is used as a backup destination. Okay, so that servers, the destination, all of the stuff gets backed up there. It's encrypted. It's not on the network per se. It's using a special encrypted protocol between each machine and the backup server. And then that backup server's data gets pushed off site. Some of our clients, we even go so far as to push it out to a tape drive, which is really important too, because now you have something physical that is, by the way, encrypted, that cannot be accessed by the attacker at all. It's off-site. So we have our own data center that we run, that we manage, that no one else has access to. It is ours. And we push all of those backups off-site to our data center, which gives us another advantage. If a machine crashes badly, right? The hard disk fails. Heaven forbid they get ransomware. We've never had that happen to one of our clients. We've had it happen prior to them becoming clients. Is that we can now restore that machine either virtually in the cloud, or we can restore it right onto a piece of hardware and have them up and running in 4 hours. It can really be that fast, but it's obviously more expensive than some people are looking to pay. All right, stick around. We got a little more to talk about when we come back. What are the Russians doing? How can you protect your small business? If you're a one-man, one-woman operation, believe it, you've got to do this as well, or you could lose everything. In fact, I think our small guys have even more to lose. CraigPeterson.com. Backups are important. We're going to talk about the different types of backups right now. What you should be doing, whether you're a one-person little business or you are a multinational. Obviously, scale matters, but protecting your data is one of the most important things you can possibly do. I have clients who had their entire operating account emptied out, completely emptied. It's just amazing. I've had people pay a lot of money to hackers to try and get data back. And I go back to this one lady over in Eastern Europe who built a company out of $45 million all by herself. And of course, you probably heard about the Shark Tank people, right? Barbara Corcoran, how she almost lost $400,000 to a hacker. In fact, the money was on its way when she noticed what was going on and was able to stop it. So thank goodness she was able to stop it. But she was aware of these problems, was looking for the potential, and was able to catch it. How many of us are paying that much attention? Now, one of the things you can do that will usually kind of protect you from some of the worst outcomes when it comes to ransomware is to back up. And I know everybody says, yeah, I'm backing up. It's really rare when we go in and we find a company's been backing up properly. It even happens to us sometimes. We put a backup regimen in place and things seem to be going well, but then when you need the backup, oh my gosh, we just had this happen a couple of weeks ago. Actually, last week. This is what happened. We have something called an FMC, which is a controller from Cisco that actually controls firewalls in our customers' locations. This is a big machine. It monitors stuff. It's tied into this ICE server, which is looking for nastiness. We're bad guys trying to break in, right? It's intrusion detection and prevention, and tying it into this massive network of 1 billion data points a day that Cisco manages, okay? It's absolutely huge. And we're running it in a virtual machine network. So we have 2 big blade chassis full of blades, and blades are, each blade is a computer. So it has multiple CPUs, it has a whole bunch of memory, it also has in there storage. And we're using something that VMware calls vSAN. So it's a little virtual storage area network that's located inside this chassis, and there are multiple copies of everything. So if a storage unit fails, you're still okay. Everything stays up. It keeps running. And we have it set up so that there's redundancy upon redundancy. One of the redundancies was to back it up to a file server that we have that's running ZFS, which is phenomenal. But let me tell you, it is the best file system out there. I've never, ever had a problem with it. It's just crazy. I can send you more information if you're ever interested. Just email me at craigpeterson.com anytime. Be glad to send you the open source information, whatever you need. But what had happened is somehow the boot disk of that FMC, that firewall controller, had been corrupted. So we thought, oh, okay, no problem. Let's look at our backups. Yeah, hadn't backed up since October 2019. Yeah, and we didn't know. It had been silently failing. Obviously, we're putting stuff in place to stop that from ever happening again. So we are monitoring the backups. That network of disks that was making up that storage area network that had the redundancy failed because the machine itself somehow corrupted its file system. ext4 file system, right? They're not supposed to be corruptible, but the journal was messed up, and it was, man, what a headache. And so they thought, oh, okay, you're going to have to reinstall. And we were sitting there saying, oh, you're kidding me. Reinstalling this FMC controller means we've got to configure our clients' firewalls that are being controlled from this FMC, all of their networks, all of their devices. We got to put it all. This is going to take a couple of weeks. So because I've been doing this for so long, I was able to boot up an optics disk and mount the file system and go in manually underneath the whole FMC, this whole firewall controller, and make repairs to it. Got it repaired and then got it back online. So thank goodness for that. So it happens to the best of us. But I have to say, I have never had a new client where they had good backups. Ever. Okay? That should tell you something. So if you are a business, a small business, whatever it might be, check your backups, double check them. Now, when we're running backups, we do a couple of things. We go ahead and make sure the backup is good. So remember I mentioned that we have a backup server that sits on site, usually, depends on the size of the client, but sits on site at the client's site. So it will perform the backup. It then tries actual restore of that backup to make sure it's good. And we can even, for our clients, depending on what they want, so a higher level, if a machine goes down, let's say it catches fire, or disk explodes in it, or completely fails, we can actually bring that machine online inside our backup server at the customer site. Yeah, how's that for fancy? And bring it back online in just a matter of minutes instead of days or weeks. So that's true too if that machine had been ransomed, had its data erased, whatever might have happened to it, we can restore it. Now, we've never had to, knock on wood, except when there was a physical problem with the machine. And as a rule, starting from scratch, we can get that machine, the new machine, online in 4 hours or less. And it's really cool the way it works. If you like this stuff, man, it is great. Okay, protecting your data. I'm rambling a little bit here. You need an archival service. There's companies out there like Iron Mountain. You can, at your local bank, depending on the bank, it ain't like it used to be, get a box, right? A special box in the vault that you can put the tapes and other things in. Nowadays, there's cloud options, virtual tape backup options, which is a lot of what we use and we do, okay? We also use straight cloud at the very bottom end. Again, it's not located on the network. It's up in the cloud. It's double encrypted. It's absolutely the way to do. Now, if you're going to have a backup, and if that backup you want to be secure, it must not be accessible, okay, to the attacker. You've got to put some literal airspace between your backups and the cyber criminals. It's called an air gap. So there's no way for them to get to it, okay? Now, I want you to consider seriously using tape. These LTO, these linear tape drives, they've been around for a long time, but they're cartridges you can pull in and out, and they're huge. They're physically small, but they can hold terabytes worth of data. They're absolutely amazing. There's some great disk-based backup systems. That's what we do. Some of them have been around a long time, and they can be quite reasonably priced, all right? So it's something for you to consider, but you've got to have at least that air gap in order to make sure that you're going to be protected. What should you be looking for in a backup system? This is called 3221, which means maintain at least 3 copies of your data, store the backups on 2 different media, store at least one of the copies at an offsite location, store at least one of the copies offline, and be sure to have verified backups without errors. Okay? Does that sound a little complicated? 32110 is what it's called. It used to be 321, now it's 32110. I can send you, Karen put together a special report on this based on our research, and I can share that with you absolutely free. Hey guys, if you want it, you got it, but you got to ask me. Just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. This is absolutely essential if you're a small business, a tiny business, to do it this way. Let me tell you, okay? This is just huge. Physical backups should be stored off-site. I mentioned the bank vault. A lot of people just go ahead and take them home with them. That might be a disk, it might be a tape, it can be a little bit complicated to do. And I've picked up customers that thought they were backing up, they were using a USB drive, they were putting it in dutifully every Monday, and then every Wednesday, what happens? Every Wednesday, they bring in Wednesday's disk, and then they bring that disk home. And then Thursday, they bring in the Thursday disk, and none of them had been working. Okay, so be very careful. All of your backups should be encrypted. We encrypt it at the customer's site, and then we re-encrypt it when we bring it over to us, okay? Keys are essential, particularly if you're using a cloud-based backup. Don't use the same keys across multiple backups. Very important there. You should have some good procedures that are well documented. Test your restores, because very frequently we find they don't work. In fact, that's the number one problem, right? If they had just tried to restore even once from their backup, they would have known they had problems. And get those backups scheduled on a regular schedule. Okay, so there's a lot more offline backups and more that we can talk about another time, but this is important. If you want any help, send me an email. Just put backups in the subject line. I'll send you some stuff. Email me, me@craigpeterson.com. Now, I am more than glad to help pretty much anybody out there. I'm not going to help the Vladimir Putin, but anybody else I'll help. But you got to reach out, okay? You listen here, and I know some of this stuff is over some of our heads, some of your heads. You're the best and brightest. That's why you're listening, and I'll help you out. I'll send you some information that's going to get you on the right track. Me, me@craigpeterson.com. That's Craig Peterson, S-O-N. Have a great day.